Hey guys, this is Paul. I wanted to show you a quick run through of what it's like if you play single player for Build a Cure. So we'll go ahead and open it up, and I haven't done any setup for this ahead of time, so that way you can see exactly what you have to do to set the game up for one player, as well as how you play the game. So the first thing that we'll do is take out all the cards. Okay. Next, we're going to separate the resource deck from the disease deck. So you'll know by the backs of the cards, you'll have the disease symbol on the back of the disease deck and the atom symbol on the back of the resource deck. Okay. And there will also be all the exposure cards that you can set aside, and then all of the turn and element count, disease count, help guides that we're only going to keep 2 of them for this one since it's a single player game. Next, you'll open up the rule book, and if you notice on the first page, it'll say before you begin if you were playing with single player and then 2 players. So we'll go ahead and follow for the single player. We are going to remove 4 cards from the disease deck. That will be glanders, anthrax, arsenic poisoning, and the contagion. So arsenic poisoning, glanders, contagion, and anthrax. And for those, you can go ahead and set them aside. Another thing to note is when you're playing with single player, there are the negative effects on the disease cards, and you're just going to ignore those. So essentially you're just looking for the cure. You can kind of think of this as a single player like solitaire when you're playing it with 1 player. So we will set the disease deck off to the side. And it says only play with 6 exposure cards. And then again, what I just said, ignore all the negative effects located at the top of the disease cards. So for this one, there are a few exposure cards that have some special verbiage on the bottom that tell you to choose other players to draw from the disease deck. So we're going to remove those first. So that'll be 1 and 2. And we need to pick 2 more, so it doesn't really matter at this point. We're just going to pick those, and we're left with 6 exposure cards. Okay. And the other thing that we're going to do, which I have updated on the new rulebook online, is to remove the sulfur 2 card, because the only other disease that has sulfur 2 is the arsenic poisoning, and since that one's out of the game, the sulfur 2 is really unnecessary. So we will look through, find the sulfur 2, and the quarantine can also be removed. Look at that. Oh man, I should have gone from the other direction. Okay. So we've got those removed. The other ones to remove for the single player, as I mentioned a second ago, is the quarantine and the ultimate sacrifice. And those will all be located in the resource deck. Okay, so once we have those taken out, I'm just going to give these a quick shuffle. Now, as I've probably mentioned a few times before, when you're playing Build a Cure, you can change the way that you shuffle in these exposure cards, and that will change the way that the game is. It feels like it might be easier or harder. For this case, I'm going to split it up into 2 separate decks, about the same size, and I'm going to split the exposure cards exactly in half. So there will be 3 of them in this side, 3 of them in this side. Okay, and I will give these just a quick shuffle. Okay, there's one side. And the other one. Okay, so now that we have all of our exposure cards mixed in, the resource deck is now finished. So we'll switch over to the player 1. When you have a single player playing, you get 10 cards, so that's going to be my hand limit, and I have 5 actions per turn. So if you look at the turn guide, this will say play up to 3 of the following actions. So since it's single player, I'm going to have 5 options available. So I can play 5 elements or 4 elements and bond it, or play resource cards or other things like that. So that's the only thing that's going to be fairly different when you're playing with single player mode. All right, so we have the No More Resources card, which goes at the bottom. And next we'll have the resource deck stacked on top of that, and the disease deck. So first we're going to start off by assigning 1 disease. So we're going to keep flipping until we come to the first one. Okay, so in this case it's scurvy. Now in the rule book it says if you find scurvy first, then you can choose to stay with it or to continue on to the next one. The main reason is because of the negative effect on top, but since we're playing a single player, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to stick with this to see if I can solve it, since this is one of the easiest ones to cure. So then I'm going to mix these back in. Okay, and then I'll scoot these off to the side so that way we can get a better view once I get my 10 cards. Then I'm going to deal out 10 cards. Okay. All right. So let's see what I got. Awesome. Okay, it doesn't look like I have any exposure cards. Now, when you're playing with a tight table space, I made the cards very user-friendly, so you can stack them any number of ways. If you've got a tight area, and I know with playing single player, when you have 10 cards in your hand, it can get kind of full. So I'm going to scoot these back for now. And I've got a mystery element and these. So we've got oxygen 1, nitrogen 1, 2 carbon 1s, hydrogen 3, 10, and 20, a complex covalent, and a mystery element. Sweet. Now, for those of you who don't know, a mystery element is similar to like a wild card. It can represent any card that is found within the game. So this table will show you, the carbon 1s, there are 5 of them available. But for the carbon 8s, there are none of them available in the game. So we could not use the mystery element to represent like a carbon 8, but it could represent, any one of the other ones listed there. So unfortunately, we can't have a carbon 6 use this mystery element as that, but we could use it as a carbon 5 and then play the 1. Okay. Now, when you play with single player, the other thing that is fairly different is the markers. So you don't need to play a marker on top of an element when you place it onto a disease. Now, the reason for that is because these markers are just a way of keeping track of who placed them. At the end of each turn, you're going to have to make sure that everything is bonded for single player mode, mainly because that's just, the strategy of it. So you'll notice you might have to discard things at certain points or just wait till your next turn. The big thing is just making sure that in between turns you're drawing those 2 cards initially, and that's where you might get the exposure cards or you might get some additional resources that could help you solve that. So at this point we can see that I've got at least 2 of the oxygens, and I could probably finish out that carbon if I really wanted to with a 5 and a 1. But I'm going to hold off on that for now. And what I'm going to start off with is drawing my 2 cards. Awesome. So I got another complex and some more carbons, which is fantastic. I will start off by placing my carbon 3 as 1 action. I will play an oxygen 1 as my 2nd action. A hydrogen 3, as my third action. Now another way that you can stack these up when you're placing them is just showing the element symbol on the card, and this will kind of keep track of what's an element and what's bonded, but another way of just keeping it tight on the table. So once I have all three of those, I think I'm going to stick with that for now, because if I end up getting like a carbon 3, that would be fantastic. And if you look at this, there are 3 carbon 3s available in the game, so it's highly probable that I could come up with one of those. So I'm going to use my complex covalent bond and bond together all 3 of these for my last action on this turn. Now if you notice, I only played 1, 2, 3, 4 actions. Now you can decide to play all of your actions, or you can only take a limited number, like 1 or 2 actions, until you draw your next 2 at the beginning of your next turn. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and begin the next turn by drawing 2. Okay, so I got a carbon 15 and another complex covalent bond. Now the bonds are going to be really important when you're playing single player, because you don't have any other available players to then bond things after you've placed them. So the timing is extremely important with this. So beginning my turn, I'm going to use as my first action, draw an additional card. So I got a complex. I'll draw another one, oxygen 8. It's unfortunate, it's just too much. And for my third action, I'm going to draw another one. I get a polar. And let's see, how many cards do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so I have to be down to my 10 cards at the end of my turn. So there's going to be some things that I'm going to have to get rid of, but that's okay. I will go ahead and get rid of a polar, a carbon 15, and we will say the hydrogen 20. So now I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 cards. Sweet. And that will be the end of my next turn. I'll draw 2 cards to signify the beginning. Oh, this is perfect. So I got the other mystery element. Now let's see if I can finish this out. Okay, so I'm a little short on the oxygen. I still need some carbon, but I do have 2 mysteries. So I could play this as a carbon 3, and that would finish out the carbon. I could also place this as a hydrogen 5, and then I would still be short with the oxygen. So I'm gonna hold off and draw some more cards. Hopefully I get something better before I have to play those mysteries. So I got a hydrogen 8. Oh, this is awesome. Okay. And I will draw one more. So this is my second action. Okay. Now, this is the hard part. So I've already placed the hydrogen 3 and bonded that into scurvy. Now, there are 2 cards that are in the resource deck that are fission reduction, and that will allow me to then remove this hydrogen off of there, and then I could place the hydrogen 8 and it'd be a perfect match. Now another option is I might eventually get the hydrogen 5, and then I could finish that scurvy off with the H8. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and draw one more card. Okay, carbon 15. So at the end of my turn, I need to make sure that, again, I'm down to my hand limit. So I've got 5, 8, 10, 13, 15 cards. So I need to get down to 10. So I'm going to ditch both of the nitrogens, and we will get rid of the hydrogen 10 and the carbon 15. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, still one more, and I'm gonna throw away one of the bonds. Okay, so next turn I'm gonna draw 2. Awesome, I got a recycle resource. That's gonna be really useful. And I also got a sulfur, which is not so useful right now, but if we get another disease that requires that, that would be extremely helpful. So I'm going to draw another card, simple. Oh man, okay, here we go. So I got my first exposure card. So I'm going to exchange this out for the next disease card. Oh man, this is horrible. So it says discard your entire hand and the turn ends. So if I had placed anything on there as an unbound element, it would have been lost as well because it wasn't bonded before the beginning of my next turn. So this gets discarded along with all of these awesome cards. This is probably one of the worst things that could have happened right there. Okay, so at the beginning of my next turn, per the new updated rulebook, if you start with 0 cards in your hand, then you have to draw your hand limit. So that would be 10 additional cards. Now that could be beneficial. It could also be really bad if I end up pulling more exposure cards because I have to draw so many. So we'll go ahead and see what I got. 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 10. Oh, here we go. Okay, I know I've at least got 1 and 2. So you can see pretty early on, I was really excited because I got scurvy, and that's one of the easier ones to solve, but in the end, it didn't end up panning out so well for me. Okay, so we got the hydrogen 15, hydrogen 1, carbon 2, the complex, and 2 exposures. So I'll exchange them one at a time. It says draw 1 card from the disease deck. So we'll do this one first. Okay, dizziness. Discard all bond cards from your hand. For each bond card you discard, pick up 1 card from the resource deck. So this one's extremely bad too. So I have 5 of them. So all of these will go straight to the discard, and I will draw 5 additional cards from the resource deck. 5. Okay, thankfully I didn't get another exposure card. I dodged a bullet there. And it's good that I got a recycle resource as well. That can help me get some of those bond cards back. Okay, now the next one, I'm going to exchange this exposure card. And let me move that back over, sorry. Ooh, poison. Okay, so now we've got 2 diseases on the table now. The good thing is now I've got 2 places to start placing elements. The bad thing is there's just 2 of them, so you can take it as you may. All right, so I can go ahead and start my play. I can kind of gauge right now, I'm pretty close on the carbon here. All I need is that additional carbon 15, which there's 3 of them in the deck. And I do not have any bond cards right now, so I would have to recycle and use one of my actions to then pull one up to use that. So since I'm down to 2, 4, 6, 8 cards, I'm going to draw 1 and 2. Awesome. Okay, then I'm going to end my turn. So then I'm down to my 8 or my 10 cards. So I draw 2 at the beginning of my turn. I got a hydrogen 1 and an oxygen 3. Okay, this is perfect. So I've got the oxygen 3 that's needed to complete that. I also have the carbon 2, which would be really useful there. And I can get up to hydrogen 20, but I know there's a bunch of hydrogen 20s in the deck. So for now, I'm going to hold off on that one. Now, the other option that I have is to play, these 2 oxygens onto scurvy, and that would finish up the oxygen. So I'm going to first action, use the recycle resource to pull up a complex covalent bond. So that's 1. Second, I'm going to play oxygen 3. Third, I'm going to play oxygen 2, and then I'm going to complex bond that. Now that brings everything together. The cool thing is now that we have 6 total oxygens, we can slide that behind the disease and just branch out this carbon and hydrogen. And what that tells me is that the oxygen is now done. I don't have to keep referencing the numbers on there. And I can just focus on the carbon and the hydrogen. So I will go ahead and end my turn with that. I'm down to 9 cards, so I do not have to discard any. So at the beginning of my next one, I would draw 2. Oh, this is even better. Okay, so I've got the oxygen 3 that's needed to finish out the oxygen on poison. Now I still don't have a bond card, so I'm going to need one of those before I can do anything. So I'm going to draw 1, and I got the complex. Perfect. Okay. So from here, I am going to play the oxygen 3, the carbon 2, and since I know that the highest number of hydrogen that's available is at 20, I'm going to go ahead and place the 2 1s on there as well. And then as my last action, I'm going to play, well, actually that's not my last one. So I will remove one of these, and then I will play my complex covalent. And that way I can get all this together. And again, for this, that completes out the oxygen. So I'll move that to the top. Okay, and I'm down to 8 cards. So I'll draw my 2 for my next turn. Hydrogen 5 and a hydrogen 3. All right. So this is the unfortunate thing. I did place that hydrogen 1 already on to poison, but I do have that fission card that I mentioned earlier to remove that off of there. So if I wanted to, I could remove this, play the hydrogen 15, the 5, and the 3, and that would finish that out. Now the other option is I have this scurvy, and I could place my 5 on there, and that would finish out hydrogen as well. And I have the 6, so if I remove the 3, I could place that on there and put the 5, and scurvy would be completed. So I am going to first use an action, fission reduction, remove up to 3 element cards from a disease and place them in your hand, and each movement counts as 1 action. So if I place this, I'm going to remove that carbon 3, and that comes up to my hand. So that's 1 action. And then since I don't have a bond card, I'm going to go ahead and draw a card. Oh, awesome. So I got immunity. And I'm going to draw another one. Hopefully I get a bond. Oh, perfect. Okay. So that was 1 action to remove that. 2 and 3. So I have 2 more to go. Now the polar is only going to allow me to combine 2 items together, and I would have to place one and bond it, and I don't have enough turns to be able to do both the C5 and the C1. So I'm going to go ahead and just see what I need to discard. So I've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I need to get rid of 2 cards. I'm going to ditch the hydrogen 1 and the hydrogen 4. Okay, so I am down to 10. So beginning of my next turn, I'm going to draw 2. Oh man. So I got the bond, but I also got an exposure card. So I'll place that there, and then we'll exchange this out for the next one. Stop all of your actions and skip the remainder of your turn. So this is one of the best cards to get right now because I haven't placed anything out there. Nothing is going to be lost. All it's saying is now I'm probably just going to have to discard down to my hand limit. But this will go to the discard pile now. And I've got to discard down. So I've got 5, 10, 11 cards. So I just need to discard one of them. I don't need that carbon 3 anymore, so I'm just going to ditch that. All right. So beginning my next turn, I'm going to draw 2. Hopefully I don't get an exposure card. Oh, yes. Okay, and I also got an N. It's 2, not 1. So a little unfortunate. Okay, so I've got a simple, polar, and complex. Okay, so to be able to finish this out, I need to play my carbon 5, 1, and my 5. So this would be 1, 2, and 3 actions. So the next one I'm going to play is the complex covalent, and that will bond all of this together. So we've got 6 carbon, we've got the 8 hydrogen, and the 6 oxygen. So scurvy gets to the discard pile. That is now eradicated. And all of those elements that we just finished for the compound go into the discard pile. So now we can scoop poison over and focus on that one a little more. Okay, And let's see how many cards I got. 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so I will draw 2 at the beginning of my next turn. Oh, perfect. More bond cards. Those are really needed right now. Okay, so I have the hydrogen 1, the 3, and the 15. I'm going to need some more cards, so I'm just going to go ahead and draw one as my first action. Oh, of course, there's oranges. So the ironic thing about this is that it will cure scurvy just with a one shot, but since I already cured it, it's already gone. So it's not that useful for me. The other thing is it can negate the negative effects from an individual for one turn. So if I end up having like another exposure or a symptom card or an event card, this could help out, but for now I'm not really that invested in this card, so I'm probably going to ditch it. So this first one, my second one, I'm going to draw. Oh yes, okay, so I got the mystery or the recycle. So I'm going to use this as my third action to recycle the mystery. Because who doesn't want a mystery element? Let's be real. Okay. And let's see, how many cards do I have? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I'm going to go ahead and end my turn. So I'm going to get rid of a simple and the oranges. And that will get me down to my 10 hand limit. So draw 2. Okay, so I got a carbon 2 and a carbon 4. And I'm going to draw one additional one. Oh, even better. Okay, so I'm going to recycle out that mystery. And let's see how close I am to solving this. So I already have all the oxygen that's needed. I've got one of the hydrogen, but that's not really that useful for me right now. I've got the carbon 2. So I could use this as a carbon 15, and that would finish out the carbon. And I could use this as a hydrogen 20, and if I can get this 3 and remove that 1 with my fission, then that would finish out the hydrogen as well. So really all I'm waiting for is that N1. So I am going to go ahead and end this turn for now. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. So I need to get rid of 3 cards. I don't really need this carbon, so I'm going to ditch those 2, as well as, we'll say, one of the polars. Okay, so beginning my next turn, I'm going to draw 2. Hopefully, again, no exposures. Oh, even better. This is going to go really well. Okay, so for my first action, I'm going to recycle the, let's see, I think we had a carbon 15 in here, or possibly a hydrogen 20 as well. Either of those would be really great. Okay, so that's my first action. My second action, I'm going to play the fission, removal, take off the hydrogen 1. So then 3, we'll say 4, and I'm gonna polar covalent bond those together. So I use this as a carbon 15. Now because I used a polar covalent bond, this means that I can only combine 2 items together. So in this case, I'm combining 2 single element cards. So these are safe now, they show the compound, but they are not connected to the main compound just yet. Now for my next turn, I could use like a polar and bring those 2 together, or a complex. But for now, it's safe. It's just gonna need some more work later on. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. So I'm gonna start my next turn. Oh, of course, the irony behind this. I pick up the carbon 15 right after I place that mystery element. Okay, so I've got the 20 on there. So my first action, I'm gonna place the hydrogen 3, and that would finish out the hydrogen. And I've already got the oxygen. The carbon is gonna be finished with this one. So the next one I'm gonna place is the mystery element as if it were a nitrogen 1. and then I'm going to complex covalent bond all that together. And that brings all these over. And so my hydrogen is finished. My carbon is finished with this one. And my nitrogen. So everything is done with this. I've cured the last active disease, so that means that I win the game. So I did pretty good. There was about this many resources left, and I've gone through 4 out of the 6 exposure cards. Now, as you can see, I started this one. I usually recommend at least 6 exposure cards when you're playing with single player. If we get to the stretch goal that has 2 more exposure cards in the deck, then you can add additional ones in there to make the difficulty higher. You probably just don't want to start off with 10 of these in the deck right from the get-go, because as you can see, you know, in single player it went by fairly quick. You know, I hit poison, scurvy, fatigue, dizziness, and unconscious, and I went through a decent portion of the deck. As you can see, this is what was left over, and this is what we went through, so about 2/3. Anyway, that is the quick run through of a single player game of Build a Cure. Now, as I mentioned before, it is more of a like solitaire, more like a puzzle that you're trying to solve when you're playing with one player, mainly because you know, you don't have the cooperative play that you normally would with additional players. You can also play as if there were 3 or 4 people playing, just dealing out separate hands. For me, I just prefer to play the solitaire mode. But anyway, if you guys have any questions, let me know. But other than that, thank you guys for giving me the awesome idea for running through a quick video for the single player, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys later.